Happy Sunday to all of you out there in social media world. This is, yes, Brother Dana coming to you from Chicago. To all of my awoken Hebrew Israelite or so-called black family members out there, I want to give you a shout. And to those Gentiles that have also, like myself, been awoken to this truth, I give a shout out to you as well. Today's topic, or what I really want to bring to you, is to challenge our white Gentile evangelical believers that we say that we are a people that live by faith. And what I'm going to talk about and share is, do we really live by faith, or are we actually in bondage to fear? And when I look at our behavior as a nation, and we pride ourselves that this nation was founded on the principles of the Bible, Christianity. So to excuse any of our past behaviors because we say, well, you know, Brother Dana, we weren't founded on Christian principles, but you know, some years later we then became a Christian nation, then you may be able to forgive some of our past or our founding behavior because we were not acting according to Christianity and the principles of the Bible. But that is not the case, because over and over, growing up, what do our churches teach is that we were founded on the principles of the Bible, and all of this immorality and this stuff that's happening is happening because we're losing or allowing other people to take this nation off of what was once based on Christian principles. And so when I look at our nation from the very beginning, and I look at how we continue to keep our nation and how we want to keep our nation, what Christian principles or biblical principles is it founded on? And so that is why I say that this nation and white evangelicals, we do not live by faith, but we live off of fear because we are in bondage to it. And that is why I actually came up with this picture that says, my white evangelicals be like, I surrender Jesus my all to you, except the Second Amendment and lots of other things. But anyways, let's look at, and I want to challenge you, is what is faith? Well, I'm going to read to you from Hebrews chapter 11, and it says, what is faith? It is the confident assurance that something we want is going to happen. It is the certainty that what we hope for is waiting for us, even though we cannot see it ahead. Men of God in days of old were famous for their faith. And so let's be honest, white evangelical America, what we want is continued control. What we want is continued white supremacy. So if this is ordained by God, as we have always taught that it was, because it was us that has taken or took our so-called black brothers and sisters from the bush, and through our Christianity have taught them how to be people, how to be civilized, how to be like us. And now let's look at fear. And it says in Psalm 118, 6-7, the Lord is with me, I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? The Lord is with me, he is my helper. Or Proverbs 29:25, for the fear of man will prove to be a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe. And then another one, there were many like those who were intimidated by the opinions or the persecution of others, John 7:13. And so white evangelical America, based on just those verses, do we live by faith or do we live by fear? If we live by faith, believing that we are the supreme beings and that this nation belongs to us, then why do we believe that we must live by the sword to keep what we believe God has given us? So in Hebrews chapter 11, I'm going to start now at verse 3. And it says, by faith, by believing God, we know that the world and the stars, in fact, all things, were made at God's command, and that they were all made from things that can't be seen. It was by faith that Abel obeyed God and brought an offering that pleased God more than Cain's offering did. God accepted Abel and proved it by accepting his gift. And though Abel is long dead, we still learn lessons from him about trusting God. What's our offering to God? What is our offering to God? Really surrender all? Or surrender all, but you know, God, got to keep those guns, swords in our hands, because we must obtain white supremacy. And you know what gets me on that? We marvel at Jesus Christ because we say that he gave up his heavenly throne, being seated at the right hand of the Father, living in paradise, to humble himself to become a man, to walk this earth. And yet, as white evangelicals, how dare we give up our humility and surrender our white supremacy? That's arrogance. For we are, in our minds, better than Jesus Christ. And maybe that's why when we go to church, we always think we're doing God a favor. Verse 5, Enoch trusted God too, and that is why God took him away to heaven without dying. Suddenly he was gone because God took him. Before this happened, God had said how pleased he was with Enoch. So if God is so pleased with us and how we obtain this nation and how we keep this nation and how we rule this nation, why do we fear somebody taking it from our hands? Why would God not allow us to continue to be an empire if it gives him glory and honor and is filled with righteousness and justice? Noah was another who trusted God when he heard God's warning about the future. Noah believed him, even though there was then no sign of the flood, and wasting no time, he built the ark and saved his family. So you don't want to heed the warning that justice of judgment is coming from God unto the United States, specifically white America, white evangelical America. Noah, by faith, believed it. But see, we can't have faith to hear from the voice of God when we live off of fear and hate, fearing that which we hate, minorities and our so-called black brothers and sisters, that they are going to take our white privilege away. Well, Abraham trusted God, and when God told him to leave home and go far away to another land that he promised to give him, Abraham obeyed. Did we come to this land far away because God promised to give this to us? Or did we, as Edomites and in the spirit of Esau, we took this land by the sword? Away he went, not even knowing where he was going. And even when he reached God's promised land, he lived in tents like a mere visitor, as did Isaac and Jacob, to whom God gave the same promise. Abraham did this because he was confidently waiting for God to bring him to that strong heavenly city whose designer and builder is God. You know, Sarah too had faith. Because of this, she was able to become a mother in spite of her old age. For she realized that God, who gave her his promise, would certainly do what he said. And so a whole nation came from Abraham, who was too old to have even one child. A nation with so many millions of people that, like the stars of the sky and the sand of the ocean's shores, there is no way to count them. And yet, whether you want to accept the truth, white evangelical America, we are enslaving the very descendants of Abraham. We have called them blacks, colored, African American, and several other bywords. Even as Deuteronomy chapter 28 said that his chosen people would be named and called by bywords, not their real name, because it would be lost for 400 years, while the favor would rest upon the Gentiles, read in Romans. And now that favor and that time of us Gentiles is coming to an end, we now will have to face justice and judgment from God for how we have treated the true chosen people of the Most High. And so, again, are we living our lives in faith, or do we live our lives in fear? Bondage to fear, which results us in holding the Second Amendment even above the very words of God. But see, when you look at Esau, when he gave up his birthright, he gave up his birthright for an immediate need of hunger. We, even as white evangelicals, will give up every single one of our morals that we hold over the head of everybody else so that we can maintain and sustain our privilege and our white supremacy in this nation. Forgetting that greater than us is God, because how dare we ever believe that we would be punished by God, for we are such righteous, great people. And look at all that we do for the land of Israel. Well, again, I'm going to do another message. We are doing that in the money and supporting actually what Revelations calls the synagogue of Satan. Those who proclaim to be the true chosen but are not. Verse 17 of Hebrews 11, while God was testing him, Abraham still trusted in God and his promises. And so he offered up his son Isaac and was ready to slay him on the altar of sacrifice. Yes, to slay even Isaac, though whom God had promised to give Abraham a whole nation of descendants. He believed that if Isaac died, God would bring him back to life again, and that is just about what happened. For as far as Abraham was concerned, Isaac was doomed to death, but he came back again alive. It was by faith that Isaac knew God would give future blessings to his two sons, Jacob and Esau. Do we have faith like that in believing that God has given us this land and that we are all that we believe we are? If we do, how come we can't stand in faith to know, even like Joshua knew, that no man would be able to stand up against him all the days of his life? For as God was with Moses, so God would also be with Joshua. Is really God with us? Is that why we live in fear? Is that why we live by the sword? Is that why we hate and cannot stand our so-called black brothers and sisters rising up with equality? Is that why we need a wall to protect us? Because actually we don't have faith in God? Because maybe what we got, we know in the depths of our heart, was not given to us by God, but it was taken. It was stolen by the sword in our hands. And yet we're not going to believe that Jesus said, if you live by the sword, you will die by it. 21, by faith Jacob, when he was old and dying, blessed each of Joseph's two sons as he stood and prayed, leaning on the top of his cane. And it was by faith that Joseph, as he neared the city end of his life, confidently spoke of God bringing the people of Israel out of Egypt. And he was so sure of it that he made them promise to carry his bones with them when they left. And we say we have faith in this great America, that in God we trust? No, in the gun we trust. Because how can we trust in a God that we know did not give us this land? That we know we took it. We slayed, we murdered, we raped, and we killed. And to this day, we still do the same to maintain it. We don't live by faith. We're in bondage to fear. Moses' parents had faith too. When they saw that God had given them an unusual child, they trusted that God would save him from the death the king commanded. And they hid him for 3 months. And they were not afraid. And we say, as white evangelicals, we have faith that this nation, in God we trust. It was by faith that Moses, when he grew up, refused to be treated as the grandson of the king, but chose to share ill treatment with God's people instead of enjoying the fleeting pleasures of sin. Yes, there's myself and a few other Gentiles at this moment that are giving up our white privilege because we understand that it's greater to serve the true chosen people of the Most High than to reign in a temporary kingdom of Esau. He thought, Moses, that it was better to suffer for the promised Christ than to own all the treasures of Egypt or own all the treasures of America. So white evangelical America, do we really live by faith? Or do we live by the sword because we know we have privilege? We know we have white supremacy reigns. It's been taught that. We are better. We are greater. If not for us. Well, if that was true, then why are we afraid that God would allow anybody to overtake us? And it was because he trusted God that he left the land of Egypt and wasn't afraid of the king's anger. Moses kept right on going. It seemed as though he could see God right there with him. See, if you really think God is with us, then you wouldn't fear. And it was because he believed God would save his people that he commanded them to kill a lamb as God had told them to, and sprinkle the blood on the doorposts of their homes, so that God's terrible angel of death could not touch the oldest child in those homes as he did among the Egyptians. Well, white America, that will be the land of the Americans, white Americans, that refuse to have faith in the Most High God, to repent and humble ourselves and give up our white supremacy and understand that the Second Amendment does not follow in the words of Jesus Christ, but is the opposite. For he said, if you live by that gun, by that sword, you will die by it. But yet we continue to hold up the amendment number 2, greater than the very words of Jesus Christ. Why? Like Esau, we will give up whatever we need to give up, so that we can contain and maintain white privilege, control, and supremacy. And I don't care whether you want to admit it or not, the truth is, President Obama and the First Lady, Michelle, were degraded by us on every level. Degraded because he was a Muslim. Degraded because Michelle Obama wore a sleeveless shirt or a dress. And yet we have put every single moral and biblical principle and commandment that we have taught in our churches, so that we will raise up, not me, but raise up a president that lives outside of every single one of those morals and Christian values to protect our white supremacy. Because we don't have faith in God. Because if we did, we wouldn't have to raise up another one to keep us where we're at. We would stand firm and know that he who is for us is greater than he who could come against us. But we're like the city of Jericho. All shut up, building a wall, arming ourselves for battle to protect and keep what we have wrongfully took. It was by faith that brought the walls of Jericho, verse 30, tumbling down after the people of Israel had walked around them 7 days as God had commanded them. Well, the very true chosen people of God, of the Most High, live in this nation and throughout the world. And we are enslaving them. And that is why there is no wall that will keep us, white evangelical Gentile America, from falling down. By faith, because she believed in God and his power, Rahab the harlot did not die with all the others in her city when they refused to obey God, for she gave a friendly welcome to the spies. Go ahead and count our so-called black brothers and sisters off. But I'm going to do a video. And I want you to watch that video about who are the true chosen people, or who really are the Jews, the white Jews, who are also known as the Ashkenazi Jews. And in that little bit of research that I have done over these couple of years, if that does not open your eyes a little bit and cause you to want to do some research, then you are stuck in white supremacy and you don't want to hear the truth. And you don't care what God has to say, nor do you even respect, honor, or fear him and his word. Verse 32, well, how much more do I need to say? It would take too long to recount the stories of the faith of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah and David and Samuel and all the other prophets. These people all trusted God and as a result won battles, overthrew kingdoms, ruled their people well, and received what God had promised them. They were kept from harm in a den of lions and in a fiery furnace. Some through their faith escaped death by the sword. Some were made strong again after they had been weak or sick. Others were given power, great power in battle. They were made whole armies turn and run away. We don't have faith. It says that their faith caused great armies to run away. It said that their faith cause their sick to become healed and strong. By faith, they obtained the promises of God. Well, if us obtaining this land was a promise of God, then how come by faith did we not receive it? How come by faith have we not kept it? And how come we're not using faith to keep it? Why? Because we got it by the sword. We keep it by the sword. And we're going to continue to fight by the sword. However, Jesus said, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Some were laughed at and their backs cut open with whips, and others were chained in dungeons. Some died by stoning and some by being sawed in two. Others were promised freedom if they would renounce their faith, then were killed with the sword. Some went about in skins of sheep and goats, wandering over deserts and mountains, hiding in dens and caves. They were hungry and sick and ill-treated, too good for this world. They were too good for this world. And these men of faith, though they trusted God and won his approval, none of them received all that God had promised them, for God wanted them to wait and share the even better rewards that were prepared for us. See, we also preach that this is not our home, but we sure fight with a sword to keep it and keep our white supremacy as if it is our home. And maybe that's because we live by the spirit of Esau. Because, see, Esau was given a blessing from God that he would obtain great lands and nations by the sword, and that he would keep it by the sword. But that was temporary, because the eternal blessing was given to Jacob and his descendants, which we are not. We are Gentiles. We are not descendants of Abraham. But thank the Most High God for Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach, that yes, in the season of favor towards the Gentiles, we have been granted an opportunity to humble ourselves and to accept him. But we are now coming out of that season, and the Word of God said that if we are going to worship Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach, we must worship him both in spirit and in truth. Well, the truth of the fact is we are not who we claim to be. The truth of the fact is that we have not lived by faith, but we have lived by the sword, and we have killed and destroyed nations of people. And currently, and for the last 400 years, we have specifically enslaved, raped, murdered, killed, and done injustice to the very true chosen people of the Most High God. And Paul in Romans said that while we, the wild branches, are given an opportunity to be grafted into the natural tree with the natural roots, that we are not to grow haughty and dislike towards the true natural branches. For if God himself did not spare judgment and discipline upon his own natural children, how much more will he not spare the wild branch, the grafted in wild branch, us white evangelical Gentiles? So my question to you is, how did our ancestors obtain this land? Was it by faith or by the sword? How have we, white America, continued to keep this land? By faith or by the sword? And how do we plan to keep this land? By faith or by the sword? And how are we keeping it? And why do we need to resort to the sword? Because the word says by faith, no one would be able to stand up against us all the days of our lives. Greater is he that is in us, who we say is Jesus Christ, and he is the world. But yet, that's secondary to the power of the Second Amendment. So, white evangelical America, you're in bondage. You're in bondage to fear. And when you live in fear, you cannot hear the voice of God. because you are in fear of that which you have hated and hate, which we have called our so-called black brothers and sisters. But in reality, they are the true chosen people of the Most High. Do your research. Many don't want to do it because at times we don't want to know the truth. Because we may have to humble ourselves. No, we will have to humble ourselves and give up our white supremacy. I mean, come on. If Jesus gave up his throne, as we teach, to humble himself, to walk as mere man, how arrogant it is of us to think that we don't have to give up our white supremacy, our white privilege. And because we don't, we live by the sword. But Jesus said, put your sword away, for those who live by the sword die by the sword. To my Hebrew brothers and sisters and those that have been grafted in because you have taken a look at truth and you have earnestly gone to God to reveal to you your racist behaviors and attitudes, to humble yourself and to seek his face, he will open your eyes and your heart to see the truth. And that truth will set you free. For I'd rather serve the people of the Most High God than to reign with a temporary white supremacy that is about to fall. Thank you for listening in. You can hit me always at onelovesociety.love. That's onelovesociety.love. Thank you again, and to all of you out there, I say good night and shalom. Bye-bye.